Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Safe Passages. I'm your host, Tara Jabari, and today we have Janice from the Traveling Lens Insider Substack. Welcome, Janice. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Um, now, I Safe Passages has a couple of things that it focuses on. A big one is travel, and I also want to combine it with tech literacy or digital literacy, right? Meaning to be smart with your tech use. And I think it really, because these are two things people keep saying they want to do or be more aware of and to take more action or more control of, but they rarely do, or they're not really sure how to. So I'm bringing experts or people who actually do it and to have this discussion and stuff like that. So, like, I interviewed another Substacker who travels the world with their kids. I'm a nomad. So if I say you can travel with your kids, who am I? Rightfully so, I don't travel with kids. But when I'm talking to someone who does, they can say that, and kind of give tips and stuff like that. They said, our children are actually quite adaptable, children in general. So you're underestimating that ability, so that's why.
Mm, for
Um,
sure.
so Janice, your Substack, a little bio thing,
Mm,
is really well kind of pointed out that, you teach people or you share how to unlock premium flights through points, plan every trip without, the chaos and the headaches, and capture photos that are worth framing. So,
mm.
first, I was wondering, how did you get into that idea of that niche?
Yeah, regarding points and miles or?
Yeah, like how did you decide, okay, I'm gonna, photography and travel, but in this specific way?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, I they're all, I guess, passions of mine. Ever since, I was working full time, being able to buy my first camera when I was, I think, 20 or 21. Like my first, back in the day was like a DSLR, and they were like, yeah, a couple of $1,000 cameras. These days are a bit cheaper now. So
Yes.
I was always interested in photography. I was always taking photos. Those little point and shoots back in the days in your 2000s and yeah, I guess in the 2000s it was a point and shoot. Um, so when I first got my first quote unquote real camera, yeah, I just, enjoyed the fact that I could take the camera out when I travel. And that was mostly what I was doing for a lot of my 20s.
Mm,
Um, and then I think the points and miles was like a really great supplement because obviously it's able to try and
yeah.
take every dollar further, right? Like rather than spending like quote unquote real money on it, you're able to use some points and miles to make your flights or your hotels cheaper. I mainly travel I mainly use my points and miles for flights rather than hotels, but you can definitely get good value around
Yeah.
hotels as well.
And I admit I I have the Chase Sapphire Reserve, which is constantly being voted as one of the best
Hmm.
travel credit cards, and I had heard
Yeah,
about it through a bunch of travelers. Um,
yeah.
it's not cheap, but it really is a
No.
really good one. However, I never really know how to use the points effectively, and they're like,
Yeah,
"Don't accumulate," and all sorts of. So I was like, "Oh, this is annoying. I don't know how to work this thing," and I would keep
yeah,
using it for like Amazon gift cards, and they're like, "No, no,
yeah.
no, no, that's stupid." And I'm like, "It is?" And they're like, "Yeah." So so I started trying to find ways of educating myself on how to do it because then they're like,
Yeah,
"I flew first class or business class for,"
yeah,
because I've had flights that are 17 hours and I'm in
yeah.
coach, middle
Yes.
seat.
Yeah,
And I'm like, "How did you do that?" So, that's how I found you. I was
yeah.
like, "Okay."
Okay.
Um, so definitely educate me. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we'll get there. Um, but one of the things is that, um, we have like, Safe Passages is, particularly the podcast itself, has a
Mm,
lot of people who are not just people who want to travel more or travel for vacation and are
Hmm.
more settled, it is a lot of nomads. So they do travel more often than normal.
Yeah.
So it's a good mix of people. Um,
Yeah.
so keeping that in mind,
Mm.
um, is there a like a way to that you have noticed, common mistakes people make when they look into finding good points with credit cards or using their credit card points in the wrong way, that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. I actually ended up writing a whole article about it
Okay.
because, yeah, it's such a common problem, right? Like, especially when you're starting out with points and miles, it's so overwhelming that there's just so much information online. It's hard to kind of figure out what's like really, really important or what's just that 1% that, you know what, you just don't have to worry about, especially when you start. I think one of the common maybe mistakes or like perceptions that people have is that, you don't want to get a credit card with an annual fee. And some of the annual fees are like pretty insane, like your Chase Sapphire card
Sapphire,
or
yeah,
your
they rose
Amex
it, yeah.
Platinum card. There's so many premium cards with, annual fees that are like $300-400 all the way up to like 800-900 US dollars, right?
Yeah.
I think rather than thinking about avoiding cards with annual fees, I think it's about figuring out whether the annual fee is worth it because a lot of these premium cards basically give you credits and perks to try and make it worthwhile for you. So we don't have the Chase Sapphire Reserve card, but we've got the American Express Platinum. And it's worked out really well for us because, we were flying a lot and you get like 5 times the points for every dollar you spend on flights, for example. So that's,
Mhm.
given us a lot of points that we've then used to redeem other flights or other hotels. That's one part. But really, to make up the annual fee, these companies, I guess, ultimately try to give you hotel credits and, dining credits and lounge access and all this stuff. And sometimes it's really, really worth it. Like, we were using the Amex Lounge literally at least twice a month, if not 4 times a month, because it'll be like me and my husband traveling, for example. So,
Yeah.
that's a lot of free food or free drinks or somewhere, a bit more pleasant to relax in, depending on, which city you're in. But also, if you were going to already stay in a hotel and the credit card included like a $300 hotel credit. Well, you're already going to spend money at a hotel at some point in time. So it's kind of just offsetting the annual fee. So, yeah, so I think that's really the biggest thing is about just shifting your mindset around, sometimes annual fee is worth it and sometimes it's not. So you just got to think about your travel pattern and your expenses and get cards that match the pattern and the expenses that you have. Another thing that I think you've already mentioned yourself is around redemptions. What I always say, and it's just like my own mindset shift as well, is in a way, once you get into the game, it's like really easy to earn points and hoard points, but it's very hard to like spend it because you're like, oh, you just want to keep accumulating. But at the end of the day, points aren't worth anything until you actually spend it and like pay for a
Yeah.
flight or pay for a hotel. So I think that's a big, at least or for me personally, especially at the start when I started doing this, just wanting to hoard and not use the points was like a big problem. These days I'm much better with it. I think about it differently in that, at the end of the day, points just devalue because that's what companies will do. So the
Yeah.
sooner you use your points for the right kind of redemptions, the better value you get anyway. And the right kind of redemptions is like the most important part. Like redeeming for flights and hotels are typically going to be the most valuable type of redemptions. If you start redeeming for gift cards or merchandise, typically, I'm not going to say always, typically they aren't generally worth it as much as
Mhm.
flights or hotels. That's a typical because I guess, let's just say you're a business owner and you're earning, I don't know, 1 million points a year. It might get to a point where, you know what, you're not going to redeem 1 million points worth of hotels and flights for whatever the reasons are. And maybe getting gift cards is actually worth it for you. So you kind of just also have to think about it for yourself
Yeah.
as well. But most of the time, I would say for the quote unquote average person, flights and hotels is pretty much your best bang for buck in terms of redemptions. And I think one last one I'll share is,
Yeah.
try to focus on credit cards that give you um, the most points in terms of a welcome offer, because that's kind of how you accumulate the
Absolutely.
most points. And you just want to balance, okay, what's the annual fee of the card? Well, how many points is it giving you if you meet a, say, $4,000 minimum spend or
Mhm.
$3,000 minimum spend? And just make sure it's worth it for you. And make sure you pay your actual credit card bill in full on time.
Yeah,
Otherwise, credit cards, it's just not worth it.
right. That's gonna be one of my questions of it'll come up, but I wanted to
Yeah.
also share when you were talking about, like, oh, the annual fee. I know
Yeah.
for the Chase Sapphire Reserve, for instance, it
Mm.
had risen pretty
Mm.
substantially. I gotta
Yes.
double check the numbers, but it went from, like, 550 to
Mm.
650
Mm.
to now $795, right?
Mm. Mm.
More recently, and a lot of
Mm.
people were pissed.
Yeah.
And a lot of friends are like, I'm not doing this
Yeah.
anymore." And I went and I was like, "There's only so much information I can understand on the internet. I need a human being." I went to the Chase Bank and I asked them and I said, "Break it down to me. I'm a Chase Sapphire Reserve card member, and you're gonna tell me, why should I keep this?"
Mm.
Um, right? And they broke it down to me with me. They
Mm.
found me somebody who would actually be able to. And I'm
Yes.
like, "What the you go from 10 points
Yeah.
to now, why is it 8 points?"
Mm. Mm.
And I was like they're like, "Ah." They said, "But it's like 10 points for planes, and it was
Mhm.
5 points for hotels. Now
Mm.
it's 8 points for planes and hotels."
Mm. Mm.
So, I was like, "Oh, okay, see, most people
Mm.
noticed that it went down for the planes, but
Mm.
they didn't notice that it went up for the
Mhm.
hotels."
Yeah.
Things like that. And then I'm like, "And then
Yeah.
what is this and this thing and that thing?" And I'm like, "What other hidden costs do you have?"
Mm. Yeah.
So, because that's, like, always the fine print kinda thing.
Yes.
So I went and he's like, "Listen, your renewal happens in July. This
Yeah.
cost goes up in October. You
Yeah.
have an extra, what is that, 8 months.
Mhm.
Test it out.
Yeah.
See, do you actually get better points out of this? And
Mm.
if
Mm.
not, cancel it before July."
Mm.
And so,
Yeah.
like, I talked to them, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Oh, thank you for pointing that out. Okay, got it, because it won't
Mm.
actually go." So I started paying attention.
Yeah.
I have noticed it didn't go up too many times of my
Mhm.
points, like, it didn't double my
Mm.
points, but it
Mm.
didn't hurt it either.
Mm. Yeah. Mhm.
So it still was pretty useful and it would eventually pay for itself, like you
Yeah.
pointed
Mhm.
out. Like I would go to
Yeah.
lounges. Therefore, I didn't pay for a snack or a meal while stuck at an airport. So it works out.
Mm. For sure.
Okay, I'm just going to make a little announcement that I had bad reception, so I had to move. That's why my background all of a sudden changed. But okay. Going back to it, hopefully you heard my credit card story. If not, don't worry about it. um, um, but Janice, I had another question of how many credit cards is too many credit cards?
Yeah, that's a great question because lots of people have that question. I don't think there's a specific answer. Um, I think that the number is different for everyone. And it also comes down to, are you going to use, all the credits and perks for each of your credit card? Do the credit cards have annual fees or do they not have annual fees, in which case there might be certain benefits for keeping a particular card? Um, even if you're not really using it very often. So yeah, it really, really depends. Like for example, I have a couple of hotel cards and they give, free night certificates. So yes, there's an annual fee, whether it's like $99 or whatever it is. Like if I go, you know what, my annual credit, my annual free night certificate is worth more than $99. I can just keep the card, use it for the annual certificate, but not necessarily use it for any of my expenses. But then there might be another card where I know I can get, three times points on dining. So it might be a card that I would spend regularly for dining,
Mm,
or a particular travel card where I would use it because It gives me 3x on travel when I'm using the subway or when I'm taking a taxi or an Uber. So I think it comes down to your pattern of spend. So only keep cards that you think there's a particular benefit. And sometimes, there's kind of no limits. I know there's lots of other people who play the points and miles game and
Exactly.
they've got like 10, 20 cards. I don't
Yeah.
have as many, but people do, and they seem to still be able to get cards. Um,
So
yeah,
as long
so
as
I
you
think there's no one answer.
so as long as you pay it on time, going back
Yes,
to your first
absolutely.
thing, then it
Mm,
really just depends on how much you feel like you can handle and it's
absolutely.
worth it. Okay, good to know.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, just on top of that as well, because you've just raised a very great point, right, is about, having like a system of keeping up with like, okay, what cars do you have? What are the annual fees? What are the perks? When is your annual fee due? Like, you can keep a spreadsheet. I use Notion. Notion's like a
Ugh.
supercharged spreadsheet, really, where I track basically all of that. And because I can, I also like gamifying things a little bit. I also track my redemptions as well to kind of see, hey, how have I actually used my points? Have they been valuable in my view of like, I've say, for example, spent three or $400,000 on like a Emirates first class flight, for example, right? But then
Mhm.
if I think about it, okay, that theoretically, if I was to pay for the flight outright in cash, which I really just never would, it would be like $20,000. So it's kind of, it's kind of
Yes.
fun as well to keep track of like the kinds of redemptions that I'm making and kind of going, okay, the credit card points and miles game is still worth the game, I guess.
Yeah. It's still something that it's a lot of work trying to figure out how to use or figure out the points the best way.
Hmm.
I wish there was just a nice little assistant that does it for you.
There's definitely
But
services that can book flights based on the points and miles that you have. But I would say these days it's easier than ever. When I first started
yeah.
using points and miles like 10 years ago, for example, you just didn't have as many search tools that summarized like different redemptions that were available. These days, there's just so many free tools that you can use even if you're not super committed to the game. So like one that I really enjoy using because it's just so easy is called Pointsia, like pointsia.com, and it's free and you can search across many different programs. So whether it's like credit card programs or whether it's what am I thinking of? Like the airline program directly.
Mm.
If you have, say, United Points, for example, you can just search directly. So there's just so many tools these days that I think you it makes it a lot easier than it used to be.
Okay. Yeah, good to point out because there's all sorts of I know there's like card pointers or something
Hmm.
like that.
Hmm.
And then there are people who are like, no, I need to use this card for this
Yeah.
restaurant because I get this many
Yes.
points. And I'm like, no, I can't figure that out.
Yeah, there's a lot going on for sure. I think keeping it simple and just focusing on the things that you're going to spend on is what I would say, especially if someone's finding it overwhelming. Like, don't try and maximize every possible thing. Think of like the big spend categories and focus on cards on that. Like, if you enjoy eating out, find a card that gives you a lot of points on dining. If you find you travel a lot and you fly a lot, then, some of the premium cards where you're getting a lot more points for every dollar you spend might be worth it, especially if you're doing it regularly. But if you don't fly very much, potentially, or some of these premium cards might not be worth it because you're actually not using that particular feature.
Mhm. Now, going to again the aspect of safe passages of being more safety or tech conscious and stuff. It is we're dealing with credit cards. Whether you're putting your credit card
Yes.
into a portal or applying for credit cards and things like that, what are some safety tips and again, common mistakes people have made that you've noticed and you're like, "No,
Hmm.
no, 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 don't do that."
Yeah, I have a few things that I personally do. So especially when you start having quite a few credit cards and you're not actively using a lot of them, a lot of banks and banking apps will allow you to lock your cards, which means people can't actually use that card even if they had your card details. So that's something I do. I pretty much lock all the cards I don't actively use. A lot of banks obviously will have banking apps and they allow you to set up alerts for spending. You can set up alerts for domestic spending or international spending, or like, oh, if someone spends more than $50 on your card, you want to be alerted. Whatever those alerts are, you can set those up. They've been super convenient. When I was actually traveling in the US, my wallet actually got stolen. And the only reason I realized like 30 minutes later was because whoever I think stole the wallet or found my wallet basically tried to use my credit cards to buy, I don't know, a couple of $1,000s worth of merchandise from somewhere, like a handbag or something.
Mm.
And then the bank immediately paused the transaction, alerted me on my phone. And that was when I realized, oh, hang on, where's my wallet? So then it was very easy. Nothing was actually deducted. I called the fraud line. They canceled all my cards. And, that was it. But if I didn't have that alert turned on in all my banking apps, I wouldn't have realized that the moment that someone tried to spend on my cards. The other thing as well is I know there's a lot of banks, especially in the US, there's a lot of banks, a lot of potential credit cards that you can get, whether it's like a hotel card or an airline card or a store card. Um, you know, the most basic thing to do these days is to do some research online. There's just so many card reviews. So if you're ever in doubt that a card is a bit dodgy, or maybe you're not quite sure if this is like a legitimate bank or something like that,
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. Do some basic online research. There's literally a card review for every possible card. I personally have never been a fan of store cards because typically they're not going to give you as much value as non-store cards.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. And that's different from like an airline card, right?
Mm, yes, for sure.
Yeah. Again, the airline card could be worth it, especially if you travel
Mm.
and you tend to travel with that one airline.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
Because often they don't just give you points, like a welcome offer, a big welcome bonus type thing. They also give you perks that maybe you don't get unless you're a card holder, more access to award flights, or it could be free check bag, or it could be lounge access, depending on what the cards are. So yeah, airline cards are worth it if you typically fly with the same airline.
And now moving on to like your other big passion, which is
Yes,
photography.
yes.
Um, how did you get into that profession and that art form?
Yeah, no, that's a great question as well. I've always been interested in photography, like since I was, I don't know, a teenager, I guess. And when I did like family trips and stuff, my dad used to, this is like the classic story, right? One of your parents used to take a lot of photos, had a old film camera, that kind of thing. So that would be my kind of stories. My dad had or still have, I think, somewhere in his house, had an old film camera that he used to take photos,
Mhm.
when he was like a lot younger in his school days, in his sort of like 20s. And
Mm,
throughout our childhood, my dad was always very big on taking photos. And back in the day, it would be like point and shoot film cameras or point and shoot digital cameras. And yeah, I think I just grew up with cameras and grew up with photos being taken. So then I've just personally enjoyed it when I was traveling with the family every now and then, like when we do maybe a road trip or like a once a year visit of, a family who lives somewhere else in another country. Um, and then in my 20s, I, had some disposable income after I started working. And yeah, just bought my own
nice.
digital camera. And then it kind of went from there. I pretty much take it to on my travels mostly. I don't tend to do a lot of like local sort of, yeah, I guess I don't tend to do a lot of local photography, but I'm getting back into that a little bit more ever since I've
Mhm.
moved back to Australia. And I've also done, events and um, family photos and photos for friends and things like that. Like, engagement parties and weddings and birthdays and things like that. And they're definitely, very enjoyable. But I think my passion is still travel photography and being able to take photos of cities and the daily life and documenting that side
Yeah.
of things.
So with that, and you kind of share with readers about, you know, the mindset also of
Mm,
when you take a photograph, as well as, the technical sides of
mm,
it, right?
yeah.
Um, can you share a little bit more about how you decided to approach it? Because it's an interesting thing of trying to teach people or guide people about photography. Um,
Mhm.
it's something like you kind of have to do it,
Yes,
or one would
absolutely.
think. But
Yes.
it's been fun to kind of, particularly on in your notes, on Substack notes. It's been fun to see the photography, and then you're like, but this is really what it's all about, and all sorts of stuff. Like it makes you really think about when you're taking a photograph and being in the moment, or why you're taking a photo and stuff. Can you
Yeah.
talk more about that?
Yeah. I think I view photography through the lens of documenting experiences, documenting places and people and destinations more from a storytelling angle. So rather than focusing on that, hero shot of this like amazing landscape or like an amazing city, I like to photograph a series of images that kind of capture that. So, for example, you might do that panoramic sweeping shot, and then you might do the close-ups of people, enjoying
Hmm.
the local park in New York City, or I might photograph the food from a local Italian restaurant. Like, I kind of think of photography, especially like travel photography, more as a series of photos that tell the story of a place or an experience. That's kind of the mindset I kind of go into with it. Think of it more as
Yeah.
like a documentary style photography would be my view versus just focusing on those, like, I guess you see a lot on Instagram, that sort of like epic shot of this amazing waterfall or this amazing whatever it is. Yeah, does that kind of answer sort of the question
Yeah,
around mindset?
it does, and it reminds me of one of my favorite things. I'm always terrified. My greatest fear is to end up in these, but I enjoy it. It's the influencers in the wild accounts.
Oh, what is
Do you
that?
know about this one? It's
No.
it's when somebody captures clearly a person who is either an influencer or wants to be quite
Oh,
popular
okay.
online, and they're doing something silly. Uh,
Okay. Mm.
and to your point, well, the way I always think of it is like, especially if it's your photo, you'll
Mm.
remember what was going on when you took that photo,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. Mm.
So, and I lived in Rome for a little while. Not my favorite place, I'm gonna admit, but every time, and one day I just couldn't sleep, so I was up at, like, 5 in the morning, and I'm like, "I'm just gonna go for a jog."
Yeah.
And I was near the Spanish Steps, and
Yeah.
there were
Hmm.
still it's always crowded, but there was quite less people, but
Yeah.
most of them were influencers.
Oh,
You know what
okay.
I mean? And I was
Yeah.
like, "God damn it, is it really that worth it?"
Yeah.
Like, do you know who was here? Like, do you know why it's here? What is it gonna be? You know what I mean?
Mm.
But then some of my favorite photographs, I lived in New
Mm.
Zealand,
Hmm.
and, we were just passing by, Mirror Lake in,
Yeah.
Queenstown,
Yeah.
and my mom came to visit because I was living there for a year, and it's a whole thing that we went to Queenstown
Yeah.
kind of last minute. We went
Yeah.
on the Mordor,
Yeah.
and it's considered the most dangerous, roads in the world
Hmm.
road
Yeah.
in the world, and it's on our way, and we went through Mirror Lake, and I just took a quick shot of it. Is it the most beautiful shot? Does it really capture what it was like there? No, but I just
Mm.
remember that trip and how my
Yeah.
mom's like, "Oh my god, we're gonna die." I'm like, "Mom, we died at Mordor." She's like, "What? Shut up, I don't even know what that means." And how it was like just all these, like, fun memories that I remember, but that's the thing that you kind of think about. So if you have a photograph and you're like, "You went to Italy and you have a shot of people playing chess," and you're like, "Yeah, but it was fun because
Hmm.
of X, Y, and Z," or, whatever it is.
Exactly. Yeah. I totally agree with
Uh,
you. I think that's how I view photography and photos. It's like a way of triggering memories and stories because honestly, like the the kind of trips that you remember are the ones where it was unexpected. Maybe something went wrong. Maybe you go, you know what, you didn't plan for it, but you figured you would just do it anyway, whatever the thing is. And they often are like the most memorable stories that you tell when you're like remembering it with the people you traveled with, or, you know, where you're recounting it to someone new who said, oh, hey, how was your trip to New Zealand? You'll be like, oh, yeah, it was really good, but this really funny thing happened. I find those are the ones that you really remember. And when you look through photos, because that's what happens when I go through my photos, I'm like, oh yeah, this happened at this point, and this was really funny. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's more about photos being a bit of a trigger for your memories, and I think
mhm.
that in itself brings a lot of joy as well.
And now going back, because I always want to bring it back to being more aware about the way that we put, because a lot of these things go online.
Yeah.
Not always, but
Mm.
and also how you use, your digital devices.
Hmm.
Do you have any advice and safety tips, things to be mindful,
Mm.
particularly when it comes to photography and the travel photography?
Hmm. My biggest thing that I'm always very, very conscious of is I don't post photos online on social media in the moment while I'm experiencing it. I mean, for two reasons. Because A, I want to experience it and not be focused on, you know, sharing the photos of what I'm trying to experience while trying to experience it. I rather just be in the moment, be present. But also, it's a big safety thing as well. My preference
Mm,
is not to share my exact location and exactly what I'm doing where I am. So that's a big part of why I don't post in the moment. Um, and I think, you know, other things that are maybe less digital safety, but just really, really basic advice is I love, especially in a city setting, I love being able to explore in the early morning before the whole city wakes up, before the tourists come in. I love to just walk around and take
mm,
photos and be kind of in the moment. But again, it's important to make sure if whoever you're traveling with, especially if you're not solo traveling, just make sure you're telling them where you're going, what time you might be back,
mhm,
and depending on, I guess, the city along the way, if you're, say, going to explore on your own for like an hour or two, you might want to actually kind of share some updates with them along the way, just so that they know where your latest location is, especially if you're not very comfortable doing a lot of this solo walking and traveling on your own. And of course, like, you know, if I was traveling somewhere solo, I try and focus on exploring during the day when there's obviously
yeah.
daylight hours and there's a lot of, you know, everyday people around.
Yeah, I was gonna say, especially if you're in a place for a few like a
Mm,
week,
yes.
um, I also try not having to take my camera or my phone out
Yes, exactly.
on the first couple of days, because that's when
Yes.
you're most obvious that you're not
Mm,
a local or you're just visiting. And
yes.
pickpocketers in particular,
Mm,
it's their job. So they look
yes.
for the tourists because they're like, well, they're
Yes.
the easiest targets. It's a
Yeah.
business for them. And
Yeah.
so you will be like, okay, I'm at my hotel. That's a really beautiful fountain or
Mm,
something. Fountain's not going anywhere. It's right outside your
absolutely.
hotel. Don't worry about that. Keep walking around and you're exploring and all sorts of stuff. And then as you want to go about by the second, if you can, third or fourth day, that's when I'd be like, okay, now I know.
Yes.
And I know the general idea. And that in the early mornings, then you're like, "Ugh,
Mm,
now I can take a photo of the fountain." Because if
exactly.
someone's watching you, they're like, are
Hmm.
they a tourist? You're like, dude, but you know
Mm,
exactly which way you're going. And they're like,
exactly. Yeah.
damn, you know. So
Yeah, for
that would
sure.
be my advice because I've always noticed that. And to your point, I'm not a huge fan of sharing your location at all times. But to your point, if
Mm,
you're going to go and explore, that's one option you might want to do is you're like, I'm going to share
mm,
my location for the day because
mm,
you're going to separate from your husband for the day.
mm,
And you're like, just so
mm,
you know where I am, but I'm going to still
mm,
text you because maybe my
mm,
phone got stolen.
so true.
You know what I mean? So going back to your
Yeah.
point of like every once in a while, give them a, report and you're like, oh, I found a
Mm,
nice cafe and stuff. So they
yeah,
know that it's
exactly.
still you.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on so many great topics already. Um, I think something that springs to mind, going back to the points a mile thing, something that springs to mind is keep it simple. It does seem overwhelming, because it's one of the first things that you had mentioned, right? I think rather than aiming for perfection where you must know the exact perfect credit card or the exact perfect redemption that you're trying to, target, like don't aim for that. I think look at really if you're getting your first credit card because you want to earn some points and get started, just think about what do you spend naturally? Is it eating out? Is it flights? Is it whatever it is? Then figure out what are some cards that match that spend. And then that's kind of your starting point. And in terms of redemptions, I think, yeah, the biggest thing is rather than focusing on this exact flight that you want to take, be pretty flexible with it to go, look, I could go to Rome or I could go to Florence or I could go to London, wherever it is, and be flexible with your destination and be flexible, a little bit more flexible with like the exact date that you need to travel, because that
Yeah.
opens up so many more doors around redemptions. And you also hopefully won't be disappointed where you go, oh, I couldn't get that exact flight I wanted to Rome, for example, right? You could go, oh, okay, I couldn't get that exact flight to Rome, but I could get it to Florence, and then maybe I can take a train to Rome or something like
Hmm.
that. So I think just having that mindset, and I think that's a really important travel mindset as well, right? Like being able to have a plan, but also be flexible to make changes to your plan without feeling too disappointed about it.
That's good advice, and that I need to work on.
And we all do, especially the planners in us, and I'm certainly one of them.
I know. It's so hard. But yes, thank you so much, Janice. I've been wanting to get you on for a while, so I'm glad we got to finally
It's
get
been a
this
pleasure.
done. And yeah, so everyone, you're obviously in the show notes and as a collaborator on this, but yeah, till
Thank you.
next time, everyone.